Hefjasek, lifting cybersecurity.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Today's presentation will be on cyber warfare and military operations. To preface this, I'd like to say anything that is said during this presentation does not represent the views of the U.S. Navy, Quidel Ortho, or Beacon Interactive, and are the sole views and recommendations of myself, Anthony Iosa. So who am I? I'm a CTTC in the U.S. Navy, a Cryptologic Technician Technical Chief. I enlisted in 2017. I discharged next month. I am an electronic warfare expert. I specialize in anti-ship missile defense and electromagnetic spectrum operations. I obtained my bachelor's degree from American Public University last October of 2024. I also obtained my PMP, CAS Plus, Pentest Plus, and CISP certifications while in. Today's objectives. Goals of military cyber operations: advanced persistent threats, Operation Shady RAT, Fancy Bear, Stuxnet, state-sponsored actors, and that will all wrap into the real-world effects of military and cyber operations. Goals of military cyber operations. You have espionage, political influence, critical infrastructure, kill buttons, technology replication, and retaliation. So on the left, we have two people that are voting. I put that because we will be talking about Fancy Bear's intrusion into the United States network of the Democratic Party during the 2016 presidential election. And then the two to the right. The middle picture is Type 071 Amphibious Transport Dock and LPD-26 Littoral Platform Dock. The middle one is Chinese, and the one on the right is ours from the United States. If you notice, they look pretty similar. Likely some reverse engineering, maybe some stolen documents. I'm just spitting that out there. Don't really know for sure, but they're pretty similar. Advanced persistent threats. The definition directly from National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, is an adversary with sophisticated levels of expertise and significant resources, allowing it through the use of multiple different attack vectors, i.e. cyber, physical, and deception, to generate opportunities to achieve its objectives, which are typically to establish and extend its presence within the information technology infrastructure of organizations for purposes of continually exfiltrating information and or to undermine or impede critical aspects of a mission, program, or organization, or place itself in a position to do so in the future. Moreover, the advanced persistent threat pursues its objectives repeatedly over an extended period of time, adapting to a defender's efforts to resist it, and with determination to maintain the level of interaction needed to execute its objectives. On your screen, you will see APT-29, which is Cozy Bear, a Russian cyber espionage. In 2024, they used a WinRAR vulnerability to infiltrate European embassies, and they're also known for SolarWinds and their supply chain attack. That attack is they were able to infiltrate SolarWinds and plant malware in a update that was being ready to be pushed out to their customers. Salt Typhoon, a Chinese-sponsored state actor, in 2024 infiltrated AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. On the bottom, I put the link to MITRE attack groups. That will take you directly to the website that you can go through all of the APTs, and it also talks about their attack vectors, methodology, and what they typically go after. There's no one organization that determines that someone is or is not an APT, but organizations such as CISA, MITRE, FBI will determine that someone meets the criteria of being an advanced persistent threat and needs to be watched. We're going to begin with APT-1 and Operation Shady RAT. So APT-1 is a unit within the People's Liberation Army. Operation Shady RAT is one of the first operations that they conducted. They're also known as Combat Crew. Comment Group, and Comment Panda. So this attack was discovered by Dimitri, who is the vice president of McAfee, back in 2011, and they realized that these attacks had gone all the way back to 2006. This attack was deployed using spear phishing techniques. So they did the reconnaissance to determine people of interest that they wanted access to those accounts, as they would likely be accounts that they could either elevate or already had elevated privileges and laterally move about the network. So they would spearfish these individuals, in which case the individuals would select and open the malicious email, and it would create a remote access Trojan. So this will be used to gain administrative privileges and remote to a target via their C2 server using open TCP ports. When a target would select the email, it would open that backdoor and it would immediately call back to its C2 server. From there, there were hidden comments in the web page that the malware would execute. Hackers would immediately jump onto these backdoors and start escalating privileges and conducting lateral movement. And it was a way for them to open more backdoors on other assets for persistence, just in case they got found and that one closed. They still had other ways in. And the persistence was extremely long. So the shortest one being 1 month and the longest being 28. They were known to be exfiltrating sensitive data. And on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about all of the attackers or all of the victims, specifically that they were going after. But here on the right, you can see that there were victims all around the world. It wasn't like they were just targeting the United States. And this is also not exhaustive. They were unable to determine some of the organizations within the logs that were infiltrated and had data exfiltrated from them, as the logs were very extensive. So one thing that was interesting was these threat actors did not try and cover up what they were doing. They didn't try to use any obfuscation. They straight FTP'd all of this information directly back to Pudong Shanghai, which is not a typical action that a normal hacker would do, in the sense of normally you want to cover your tracks, whether that be using computers in other countries and jumping around, whatever. So that was an interesting find. But they exfiltrated sensitive data, and they also reverse engineer equipment. We'll talk a little bit more about how that affects an economy within a country as well. This demonstrated that cyber threat actors were actively being used by government entities. This was kind of known, but it was a huge find and a very dangerous find. It is known that there were other organizations as well, but not able to be identified. We just talked about that with the logs. And there were 5 PLA officers that were indicted by the United States Department of Justice on 31 counts. These counts included things such as theft of trade secrets, unauthorized access to computers, and conspiracy to commit fraud. APT-28, Fancy Bear. This is another military unit. So we have 26165 and 74455. In 2016, they interfered with the United States presidential election. They spearphished Hillary Clinton's volunteers, and so spearphishing campaign. They stole usernames, passwords to accounts, and exfiltrated sensitive data. They did what we call credential stuffing, which is when you know the username and password and you just go and log into it. They exfiltrated from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee and the Democratic National Committee. Both of those networks were compromised. They obtained dcleaks.com and uploaded the documents there. They used computers all around the world, which they used cryptocurrency for. Cryptocurrency is often used as you can set it up to not be traceable back to you. They used false identities and stated that they were hacktivists so that people would not know that they were Russian actors. And at the end, there were 12 officers that were charged. Some of these charges also, they included conspiracy to commit offense, identity theft, and money laundering. There's also an interesting quote that the White House put out on December 29th of 2016 that I found I think it would be good for this presentation. Russia's cyber activities were intended to influence the election, erode faith in the U.S. democratic institutions, sow doubt about the integrity of our electoral process, and undermine confidence in the institutions of the United States government. I think that the saying of erode faith in U.S. democratic institutions is very important here. They were not only trying to cause political influence, but push the American people to not trust the government as much, which can lead to other issues as well, such as an uprising or things along those lines if it gets serious enough. Next, we're going to talk about Stuxnet. So, Stuxnet was allegedly developed as a collaboration between Israel and the United States, and it was intended to target uranium enrichment plants. It was implemented in 2010. However, the entire plant was air gapped, so it was delivered via USB. They found someone who would be willing to take in the USB and plug it in. It reprogrammed the ICS, or industrial control system, so that it would send commands to the PLCs, their programmable logic controllers, and cause them to act erratically. So on the right, I wanted to, just in case you don't really know, talk about what the SCADA and ICS setup kind of looks like. So your SCADA, your supervisory control and data acquisition program, that's how you manage what is happening. It's not actually what sends the commands to any of the PLCs, but it's where you can look at the information, right? So PLCs are logical. They are either true or false. So let's say, for example, here, that if we are trying to get the water level up to here, then if the water is down here, it is false. If the water is up here, it is true. And that is how you can set up, say, a valve to open or close. In this sense, the Stuxnet malware would cause these to act erratically, very quickly spinning up and down the centrifuges, causing extra wear and tear. They destroyed over 1,000 of the 9,000 centrifuges. It would also cause the uranium-235 to not separate properly. However, they did not know that this was happening for a period of time because the malware was set up to be sending data that looked normal back to the SCADA program. State-sponsored actors. So state-sponsored actors are used by governments for different reasons. One is to cause plausible deniability. If they are not a direct entity of the government, then they can say, hey, we didn't know that they were out here doing this malicious thing. It's not our fault. We didn't ask them to do this. Whether that is true or not is up to interpretation, or you have to follow the logs and see what's in there. State-sponsored actors can stay hidden rather than being identified as military or government entities. If you're a government entity, then somebody knows about you, especially first world countries. Everyone is trying to hack everyone. So through reconnaissance, enumeration, they'll find out that you are a government entity one way or another. Government-backed resources. These entities also, they get funding from the government, or maybe they get computers, training, things like that. So they have more access to things that they would otherwise not have access to, which helps them do whatever the government is asking them to do. Real world effects. So I wanted to talk about Stuxnet, Fancy Bear, and Operation Shady RAT to get to this point. So industrial control systems can be compromised to cause real world damage through remote means. This is what I was talking about with the kill buttons. In 2024, this is just one example, by the way. 2024, Russia shut down an entire power grid in Ukraine through a back door. Now, think about that. If we have backdoors in nuclear plants, power plants, water plants that we don't know are there and they're not actively doing anything, then that is a serious concern. Someone can go in, open that back door, and cause havoc at the touch of a button. There are also ways to get around, say, an antivirus and things like that. So if these, say, kill buttons, these back doors, are already in a network, and let's say there's a file hidden, and the actor knows where a file repository is that does not actively get looked at through an antivirus, then maybe they'll put it there and it can go as long as they want without it being found before being called back up. We have Russia cause political influence in the United States. So we've seen that, how they did that, causing political influence. We can do the same thing, but altering how a country will vote for your own country, for whatever reason they decided. I haven't read that portion of the documentation yet, but it can cause uprising and cause issues with the government being able to control their people. We don't have that as much here in the United States, but there are other countries that it could seriously change how the American people, how people act. Stolen schematics of technologies can show weaknesses and cause financial damage, not only to an organization, but the entire country as a whole. So if trade secrets are getting stolen, so let's say China steals our trade secrets for X, Y, and Z, and they reverse engineer and they can make it cheaper, well, there's a chance that people are going to start buying that stuff from them. That causes issues when it comes to our own country having positions, because if we're not the ones that are making and selling the product and somebody else is, then that's money that's being taken away from our economy as well. Not to mention the fact that these organizations, sometimes they spend decades just doing research and engineering these things, and all of that is stolen and reverse engineered, and somebody else has that product or a version of that product, and half the time much cheaper than, say, we do. Stolen documents can reveal operations. Stolen sensitive documents is what I have here, right? When it comes to conducting military operations, we have what's called OPSEC, operational security. So, for example, if we're deployed, we in the Navy pull into a port, we're not supposed to tell anyone previously to pulling in that we're there. And while we're even there, we're only supposed to talk to family, for example. We're not supposed to be making Facebook posts, Snapchats, things along those lines. But if documentation were to get out about, say, a SEAL team that is going in to exfiltrate someone, kick in doors, the adversary can be prepared for that, and they can reverse the entire situation that we've spent likely weeks or months preparing. This can cause people to get hurt or die. So keeping that information safe, that's why we have classified documentation at different classifications that only specific people with the need to know, keyword is need to know, have access to, is very important. And then we can also now take cyber warfare techniques and couple that with physical techniques. So I have here taking down a communication source prior to attack. If your organization or whatever you're doing, here, military organization, let's say that you take down the entire communications of a base right before you attack it, it's going to be much harder for them to defend the base. All right. Well, today we learned about goals of military cyber operations, advanced persistent threats, Operation Shady RAT, Fancy Bear, Stuxnet, state-sponsored actors, and we talked about the real-world effects. All right. Well, thank you for watching this. Please let me know if you have any questions. I will be posting this on both LinkedIn and YouTube. And in the description, if you want to read about what I've been talking about, I'm going to post some of the documentation that I used to create this. And let me know what you think.